Hello and welcome back. You're listening to Family Planet365. I'm your host, Malena Jackson. And today we're talking about how to stay safe in public places, especially with your children. We had Deputy Tom Drake on at the top of the show to give us some ideas and just some strategies on, how to make a plan if you're out at a parade or a concert in the park and things go down, how to come up with a code word for your family. And now what we have on the line is Dr. Janet Steyer from the Child and Family Center here in Santa Clarita. And she's going to actually talk to us about what we should say to our children when there's a school shooting. Should they know about the San Bernardino shootings? Are we causing any damage? That sort of thing. Welcome, Dr. Steyer.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing just fine. Thank you so much. Dr. Steyer, tell us a little bit about what you do at the Child and Family Center.
Okay. I'm a licensed child psychologist here at the Child and Family Center. Most of my work is consultation with elementary schools and preschools on mental health issues with children. So I work with teachers and principals and school counselors on how to have the best environment for young children in the school setting.
Nice. Okay, so it sounds like you're the perfect person to talk to.
Thank you.
Dr. Steyer, so tell us a little bit about, let's start with the San Bernardino shootings, because I did tell my children, I have 4 children, and ages 11 through 6. Yeah, my youngest is 6 now, I think. Okay, whatever. So anyway, my 5-year-old came to me and, we talked about the shootings because it was on the news, and I don't really watch the news, but it was there, and my son started asking me about it, so I told them what had happened. And 3 days later, my 5-year-old was like, I dreamed last night that someone shot me and there was a hole in my chest. And I'm like, oh my goodness, what have I done? Okay, so should we censor some of this information? Do we cause any psychological damage when we tell kids about school shootings, or how can we be safe about that information?
Right. It's certainly in the way that it's presented to children, and it has to be in a developmentally appropriate manner. So what you would tell your 5-year-old or 6-year-old is probably different from what you're going to say to your teens. Mm-hmm. You're not likely to do damage to your child, so I think you're okay, on
thanks.
that one. Especially if you're, in general, loving and supportive household that's open to talking about issues. So children do need to know that something happened, because otherwise they're going to go to school and find out, and who knows what they're learning in that way. So, around age 6 and up, we look at the elementary school ages is when we may actually head off that conversation by introducing it as parents, that this thing happened. But what we say is going to be different based on their age. For a child under 6 who's not going to school, or maybe is just going to preschool, it may not be as necessary to even mention that this happened, unless, of course, they catch something on the news and want to ask questions.
Okay, so let's talk about the preschool age children. So if they happen to see something on the news or hear about it, do we tell them the truth? Like, what should we say to them?
Right. I think what's important is that you keep it very short and sweet.
Okay.
And I think the rule of thumb is maybe one sentence is enough. So someone was very angry and did a really bad thing, and that can be enough. Sometimes they'll want to know more, and then we can kind of be as factual but quick as possible. Sometimes they're like, oh, okay. That's what happened. That's fine, and walk away. So it's going to be based on your particular child. And also, if you happen to have an anxious child, or one that tends to worry about things, then we may want to be even more kind of cautious about what we would say to that child.
Okay, so then let's talk about that. So if you have an anxious child, what are some keywords, to avoid if you have an anxious child?
You can say, again, let's say you were saying that they caught it on the news, so because otherwise you don't really need to bring it up to a 5-year-old child, right, or a 4-year-old. But let's say they did catch something happened, or they do end up talking about it in preschool, which is unlikely but possible. You can say, yes, that thing did happen in San Bernardino. Again, someone was very angry and he hurt some people. But what's amazing is how everyone jumped to help really fast. And you can kind of swing the conversation into something a lot more positive. So I think that was something going through Facebook for a while, there's a Mr. Rogers quote on, look for the helpers. Whenever there's a tragedy, it's amazing the number of helpers there are and good people out there who want to make it better. So we can focus on that with our young children.
Oh, I like that. So instead of just focusing on the tragedy part of it, we can look at, mention the tragedy, like I like what you said, someone was really angry, but there were so many, what was amazing is how many people were there to help. And that kind of gives, sheds a positive light on such a dark situation. And so that would help.
Country, jumps into action, right? The firemen were there quickly. The policemen were there so quickly. It was amazing. The quick response was incredible in this particular story. So I'd like to focus more on that particular part. And it's truth. We're not lying. We're not hiding anything, but we're taking a different spin on the situation.
I like that because I never share that part. It's always just about what happened. And that's it. That's what I thought that was all that mattered. So when you talk to older children, let's say middle school, how much information can we give them? Because now I'm concerned about, like, when they're at school, I want you to know, like, for instance, and I know you're not an expert on, like, what they can do in case of an emergency, but one of the things I tell my children is, like, make sure that you can find a place to hide.
Right.
If you can, do that. But they do have questions, the sixth grader and so forth. They're like, well, why did this happen? And is it going to happen again? Okay, so again, there's probably some fear there. So what do I say not to make sure that my children aren't fearful or afraid while they're in school?
So as parents, I think we have to start first with our own emotional response, and make sure that we're feeling calm and able to talk. If it's right in the moment, it's just happening and you're anxious or scared or very emotional, that could be, it's hard for you to offer a logical discussion with the child.
Okay.
So I think the first piece is to kind of keep your own emotional response in check as much as you're able. You can be honest about it, that this makes me sad or upset or even have a tear, but to sort of feel composed before you enter the conversation. I think, what I'm hearing from maybe the questions you're asking is that the kids, their first thought is, am I safe? Am I going to be safe? So having a discussion about what the schools are going to do to make sure we're safe, and that we're all doing the best we can to keep kids safe. And the school districts in this area have definitely upped their game on that, that the campuses are closed now and locked, and people have to tell them that they've come into the campus. And these are things that we're doing to keep you safe in the classroom, because that's the most important thing to us. So if that's what they're getting at by asking the questions, we want to make sure that we address that right away.
I like that. And just go ahead, Dr. Steiner.
Yeah, and then discuss. You have to decide for your own child what news is appropriate. Whether you're going to leave the news on or whether you're going to turn it off. If you have, again, a child who's anxious and really focusing on it, you don't really need to have the news on in front of them, especially because you can't control what images are going to be shown. So it might be best to turn off the news, but talk about it. And so, let me tell you what was on there, and I'll give you the story from my perspective and our words, and decide, what they need to know and what they may not need to know.
I like that.
What I like, again, the focus for me is what can we learn from this?
Okay. So
this thing happened, but what can we do to keep you safe? What is the country doing? President Obama is on there talking about this issue. So it's important to us, and our goal is to keep you safe. And there are people out there who are going to help very quickly.
I like that. Okay, so just make sure we remind them that the goal is to keep them safe, so they don't have to be fearful or worry that, we can't guarantee that this won't happen in their environment, but, the goal is to keep you safe. And there is a great response team in place, and there are great plans in place. I like that.
And that these things are very rare. So that the media likes to focus on it, right? The news is going to be all about that. But there are so many other things going on every day. And as much as we're seeing an increase right now, the events are so rare. So it's hard for a child to focus on that when it's on the TV so much, but it doesn't happen very often. So it's so not likely to happen to you. But if something happens to your school, we're going to do our best to keep you safe.
Okay, I like that. And I like what you said as far as making sure that as the parent, we come from a good place, like, get your composure together and watch the energy that you bring when,
Right.
talking to the child about these horrific events.
Right, they're looking for your reaction. So if you're caught up, and very upset and very anxious and worried, then that's going to lead to a child to be more anxious and worried about that. So we have to be honest about our feelings, but we also have to try as best we can to keep ourselves in check.
Okay. Got it. All right. So one last question, Dr. Steyer. What can a mom or dad do if they notice their child is worried or they're, dealing with some emotional conflicts around just not necessarily world issues, because I don't think that they would know a lot about what's going on. But if they just seem to be, if they're not in a good emotional space, are there things that we can do as a family before seeing a psychologist, or do you just recommend getting help?
Oh, sure. I don't think you have to jump for help right away. Certainly depends on how long you're seeing, some anxious symptoms and how severe they are, and what age that child is, again, matters. But if you have a child who's continually worried and can't seem to get out of it, as a family, to allow them to talk about it is important. So I think sometimes we want to protect our children from thoughts that are uncomfortable, and we say, oh, don't worry about that. We'll just go do something else. Let's go to the park. Don't worry. It's not going to happen. Some children need to be able to go through this again and again. Well, how do you know it's not going to happen? Well, I don't know for sure, but I know I'm trying the best I can. But to let them communicate and that they feel comfortable saying this to us. Some kids will have to go through the, multiple iterations of it before they can say, okay, I'm all right. I'll be all right. And having that comfort and ability to talk to their parents is probably the most important thing.
And what about I think someone told me, or I read somewhere, that we should advise them to draw a picture or something. Is that something that would be clinically correct?
It can work. I mean, well, you're not going to be doing clinical practices in your house, but you can, of course. Sure, draw a picture. What do you think happened? Do you want to draw a picture of what happened? If you have an older child, do you want to write down what happened, or would you rather talk about it? Some form of communication is helpful. And then if over time, let's say there's weeks go by and this child is still anxious and maybe having nightmares on a regular basis, not just once, but it's starting to impede in their functioning and their play, then that might be a time to call a psychologist and say, I'm a little concerned. What do I do?
Okay. I like that. And tell me, where can we reach Child and Family Center? Will we just call the main line? What's the number, and how can a listener get in touch with you?
Sure. Yes, we have many therapists available for therapy here. The main number is 661-259-9439. We're on Center Point Parkway in Santa Clarita.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Steyer. It's really been eye-opening to talk to you, and actually comforting, because now I know that things can be okay. And I like the perspective that you gave as far as giving our own telling the news story in our own words, and focusing on the highlight, which is the help that is available to us in case of an emergency.
Right.
So thank you for that. Thank you.
Thank you for your attention to this issue.
All right. Nice to talk to you.
Thank you. You too.
Okay. All right. So when we come back, we're gonna talk about. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm getting a shake from my producer. This show today is interesting. All right, so we just talked to Dr. Janet Steyer, about how we can talk to our children about these horrific events. And you're listening to Family Planet 365 on your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. I'm your host, Malena Jackson. And just to recap what we talked about in today's show, at the top of the show, we had Deputy Tom Drake, our local deputy here in Santa Clarita, who gave us some ideas on how to protect ourselves and our children in public places. And one of the things that really stuck out with me is he said, have a plan and be aware of where you are. So long gone are the days we could just walk in and just assume that, everything's going to be okay. You're at a restaurant, you're going to have dinner, or you're at a concert and it's okay. You don't know who's there. So he talked about having a code word for your family, and I really like that. So you have a code word, and that the kids would know that when they say this code word, we mean business, and do as I do. And in case of an open shooting, he said to run. I never thought that. He's like, get low, run, and then fight. And let's just hope that we never encounter a situation like that. But my purpose of today's show is just to shed light on the idea and, where we are in society today. And then when we had Dr. Steyer on, she talked to us about, how to talk to our children about these events. And not to give too much detail, especially it's according to age and according to your child. If you have an anxious child, you don't want to give all this information. It could be overwhelming. It could cause more harm than good. But most importantly is, the energy that we bring as parents. We want to make sure that we are composed. We're not overreacting. We're not emotional. But when we do address the issues, and discuss it with our children, that we come from a place of positivity, like, finding the positive light in the dark places. So one of the things she talked about with the San Bernardino shootings is like, hey, this happened, but how awesome was the response team and how quickly help was available to the people who suffered or, were involved in this tragic shooting. So I think I like that because we tend to focus on the negative. That's important. So that was today's show as far as how to talk to your children about horrific events and what we can do to keep ourselves safe in public places. You're listening to Family Planet 365. Hey, I have a few announcements for you. So coming up, mark your calendars for January 23rd, 2016. We have the third annual Santa Clarita Preschool Fair at the Valencia United Methodist Church off McBean. It's going to be a great time this year. This is our third year doing the preschool fair. It's 30 plus preschools under one roof, so you can come talk to the preschool directors, talk to the teachers, and get a clear idea on, what's a good preschool program for you. That's going to be on January 23rd from 10 to 1 at the Valencia United Methodist Church. You can get more information by visiting the site, the scvpreschoolfair.com. Again, that's the scvpreschoolfair.com. And we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, I'm going to close out the show and tell you what we have coming up next week. You're listening to Family Planet 365. I'm your host, Malena Jackson. More when we return. Hello and welcome back. You're listening to Family Planet 365, your hometown station AM 1220 KHTS. I'm your host, Malena Jackson. And if you're just tuning in, today's show, we're talking about how to protect yourself in a community place, a place out in the open, like a concert, a park, a restaurant, and most importantly, how to talk to your children about these horrific events. We talked to Deputy Tom Drake about how to stay safe, and most importantly is having a plan. That's really what it boils down to is, we can't just, especially when we're with our children, and I keep saying that because when you're alone, it's different. It's just about you, right? But when you have like little ones in tow, you got to think about everybody. So it's good to, according to the age of the children, to have a plan in place and to discuss that plan with them, not to instill fear, not to say, we're going to be in danger when we go here, but just to give them an idea of if anything were to happen, here's what we're going to do. And it's almost like when you go to an amusement park and you say, okay, guys, if we get lost, then we're going to meet here. Okay, so this is our location. Come here, meet us here. And Deputy Drake also told us that, when you go to these public events, remember what your child is wearing, even if you need to take a picture or just for, we all have our phones and we're taking pictures. But he said a lot of events where the parents can't even remember what the child is wearing if they were to get separated. So it's important to think about those things as far as having a plan, remembering what they're wearing. Maybe you always wear a red shirt, or maybe you always wear a blue shirt when we go to these things. And now I understand why a lot of schools have you wear the school t-shirt when you go on a field trip, because it just makes, it's a plan. It's part of the plan. And then we talked to our very own Dr. Janet Steyer from the Child and Family Center here in Santa Clarita, and she gave us information on, how to talk to our children about these events. And it's not necessarily about giving them, play-by-play and even watching the news, because like I was sharing how, it was on the news, and then my son asked, what happened, and I went into this whole spiel about some man walked into a place and, these people shot their coworkers, and it was probably too much information. That's why I had the call today, because I wanted to get coached. But she said to really get your composure together first if your children ask ask, what happened at this school shooting or what's going on in San Bernardino, to get yourself together and to focus, state the fact of what happened. Someone was angry, people were angry, they went in and they hurt some people, but the response was so great. There were people there to help in a matter of minutes, and that's what this is about. It's about, you're safe, so you don't ever have to feel unsafe, and to know that if something like this were to happen, that the response team will be there to help you. And she also advised us to gauge, the temperament of your child. If your child is anxious, or if you sense that you have a timid child, you definitely want to be careful about how much information you give them. And it's important that the child knows that they can talk to you as the parent, and the home is a safe place to express their feelings, to express their concerns. And we should turn the news off. I like that part. The news is something that, from what I gather from the conversation, is, our children shouldn't be watching that. I don't really think we should be really watching that, but we want to stay tuned on, what's going on. But she said, you turn the news off and give your take to the child on what happened, because a lot of times we can't control what images come across the screen, and so we want to censor that part of it. So it was a great show. I learned a lot. I hope you did too. I feel safer. Do you? All right, so that's our show for today. Now, coming up next week, we're getting close to Christmas. We're exactly 14 days away from Christmas, December 25th, and I'm so excited. I don't know why. I just am. I like Christmas. We're going to talk about family traditions next week. I am going to have some people here to talk to us about how to create traditions in our family, how to get rid of the ones that aren't really serving us anymore, like, maybe going to an in-laws house that you fight all the time, but how to stay drama-free and to have great holidays and every day with your family. I'm your host, Malena Jackson with Family Planet 365. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next week. Bye for now.